Hello, Joy. Lovely. So yes, a little bit chillier, a little bit more care as you start up, as always. And as always, sort of just accounting for the cooler temperature, but realizing that when we get the posture correct, we do actually counteract some of the effects of the cold, which tends to make us sort of pull in. So, you know, if we're kind of tightening ourselves, but also trying to move, obviously there's a risk there of pulling a muscle or straining something. But weight forwards, hips gently dropping back, a feeling of sort of hanging from your pelvis, and really just reminding yourself of the feeling of this posture, the how can I put it, the kind of spacious quality that allows for that movement, and giving yourself time to find that. It will always take a little while, but you know what you're aiming for, and that will help the blood to circulate. It will start to produce heat without you having to sort of sweat and strain. So your body temperature will go up, muscles will get more blood supply, and so on and so forth. Just letting your attention rest on your breathing for a few moments. As always, trying to breathe though your lungs were down here in the belly, and looking for that expansion, belly, solar plexus, ribs, in that order as you breathe in. Just refer back to that every now and then. And of course, it's another thing that is affected by the cold, which is why people with something like asthma or some kind of respiratory problem can find it difficult in the colder weather. It's obvious, really, isn't it? You're kind of just tighter. And also, when you breathe in, if you're outside, the air is very cold, and so that introduces more cold into the system. Feeling the weight of your arms on your shoulders. Begin to apply this image of moving through water, or whatever image you use, imagining the air is thicker around you. Just noticing slow change as your body adjusts to the imagined environment. And then do a couple of the exercises that I like to do sometimes in the chillier weather. One is, of course, bouncing up and down. That's better. So I'm just trying to get the light correct. So this is a shaking movement. It's just very loose in your knees. Imagine you're kind of trying to shake out a duvet, or you've got a sack full of leaves and you're just shaking the sack down. You see, to start off with, if I do it without my hands moving, you can see them just jumping around a little bit, and I just turn in my hips. And then as my hands come around and the top of my arms get stopped by my upper body, I just let my elbows loosen and the hands swing up from my elbows. So like the tapping exercises that we do at the end of the class, this is stimulating feeling. And then still with this shaking movement, hands on your back. So just here, you may feel them, the round oval, or sort of like oval shaped structures here, the kidneys, palms of your hands on your kidneys, pressing gently. And just let your shoulders relax so that your hands are being shaken up and down. If that is difficult for you, you could try the side of your hands or the back, or just do one arm. So it's not, it works better this way, but there are ways around difficulties, as there are with most of the exercises that we do. And then let your hips drop again, still turn a little bit faster. And slowly letting your hands drop. And just give your legs a little shake. So really, with all of these movements, there is potential for adjustment. And one of the reasons I try and get people to understand the principles of what we're doing is so that they can understand why we're doing something. So if you understand why you're doing something and the way being presented to you doesn't quite work for whatever reason, then you can still find a way of doing it. This is something I've done quite a lot. So I'm always happy to answer questions about, I can't do this because. So what we think about the purpose of the exercise, and think about how you might achieve that through what you know about Tai Chi and Qigong. Now, standing. Weight about 70% in the front half of your feet. So that should give you this slight feeling of pressure in the balls of your feet. And just thinking about the feet for a moment, what you want to do initially, if this represents the foot, is this sort of sense of your foot flattening out like that. Some people describe it like if you leave a slab of butter in a warm room, it melts from below and it sort of spreads out. And in the same way, your foot is kind of spreading out. I should warn you, you can go up a size or two in shoes. I have. Now the problem with that is that you can end up losing the strength of the arch of your foot. You get flat-footed. So something that counteracts that. We need to be careful not to just tense up. If you imagine your foot on the floor and it's nicely spread out, we don't want to go back to sort of just tightening the toes, but you feel the weight in, particularly in the front half of your foot, and then you imagine somebody comes along and they take hold of the top of your foot and they pull up, and this happens. Oops. And you see when I do that, that my fingers get pulled back. So your toes gently slide back, and that raises the arch of the foot again. So that counteracts the sort of flat-footed tendency that we can get. And it's one of those exercises that you would do on its own until you get used to it, and then it becomes more natural. But I'd emphasize it's it's using that image of drawing up and just imagining the curve. It reminds me when that happens, because your foot's been flat on the ground. If you ever played this game that I played as a kid, you fill a sink up with water, take the plug out, put your hand over the plug, and then if you try and lift the palm of your hand up, it gets sucked back because you've created vacuum there. And so this raising of the arch of the foot kind of draws you into the ground a little bit more. And notice the effect on your lower back as you do that. Because your hips kind of get drawn down more when you do this, but it's a very soft action. So it's like most things in Tai Chi, it takes a while to really develop that.
Right,
You can
I'm not
integrate
sure.
that to into any of the movements.
Right,
Yes.
I'm not sure I'm understanding what you're asking us to do, because if I try and raise my arch, all I do is curl my toes in. And you're saying
Yeah,
we shouldn't do that.
that's why I said you don't try and raise the arch. You take hold of the. You imagine somebody taking hold of the back of the top of the foot. So this represents the foot. So when I pull up there, can you see what happens to my fingers?
I can indeed. But when
Yeah.
I try and do that, I either claw my toes or lift my heel, which is not what you're saying.
No, so don't try and do it, but imagine it happening. It's a very subtle. It's one of those movements that we use an image for, and then try and feel it physically. That's why I say it takes some time.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
The other way you might want to think about it, if it's easier for you, is that you're in the sand and all you're doing is you gently pull your toes back.
Right.
So that has the same effect. So rather than doing that with your toes, you sort of, if I put my fingers on the end of my sleeve there, and what I'm doing is I'm pulling them back like that. Can you see they're still flat on the floor? It's got that kind of feel to it.
Okay. All right.
So that's an alternative way of doing it. See how you get on, and give it a couple of weeks trying it every now and then, and see how that goes. So if you can do that, or when you can do that, you may find it draws you down quite naturally. So now pushing up and sinking. The expanding and contracting. So breathing pattern, if you want to follow it every now and then, of course, will be an in-breath as you push up on the expanding stage. One more time. And change. Wild goose. Fingers now. Remember that image of moving through water. An alternative image for this to the bird flying is to imagine you have a ball underneath each hand, and what you're doing is you're dropping down in water, trying to draw the ball down, and that emphasizes this dropping of your elbows and the contraction between your hip and your shoulder on each side. One more. and then changing to parting the clouds. Dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Again, that extension through the side of your body. Imagine that you're standing on an elastic band or something like that, and you've got a hold of it with your hand, and what you're doing is, as you push up, you're extending upwards, doing extension all the way through, and then here you just allow it to contract slowly. So in both directions, you're applying a particular type of effort. It's not just sort of dropping down. One more on each side. We gradually become accustomed to this more connected, stronger way of moving. It becomes just the way we would want to move. And then pushing in forward direction. The last time. And then changing. comfortable for you, add in the turn. Change to the other side. Again, if it's comfortable, the turn. Rowing a boat in the middle of the lake. One more time. Good, and then pushing the table, turning, pushing your hips back, just noting where your hands go. Again, turn the opposite way, push back and swing round in your hips. Go from the back. There, you see there, go back, around, and back up again, come into the front position. One more on each side. And just come back and stand for a moment. Take a couple of slow, gentle breaths in the standing position. Shake out. Good. So have your feet slightly wider than hip width apart. Not quite what we would call horse riding stance, this one. It's just, I suppose it's almost, yeah, it's just slightly above hip width, you can see there. But turn your feet out a little bit and begin to transfer your weight from left to right to left. Giving yourself that little bit of a moment to sink into the leg each time. And then as you settle into the foot, you raise the opposite heel, and that means you get to turn a little bit further. If you do it without, if you turn further without raising the heel, you'll pull your knee out of line. So that brings it back into line. Just make sure that when you put it back, you're still in a good position. The combination of those two things, the sinking down here and the raising of the heel as you move across, means that what you get is a sense of pushing from the ball of your foot. So one of the things we want to be aware of here, that one of the things that can go wrong is this. I can push and I can end up out here, and I'm in a very precarious position here. I'm quite tight in my back already. So as you push here, you'll feel an upward movement, but sink down in the supporting leg. Remember that when we do this kind of thing, obviously muscle and bone and tendon and ligament, the structure of your body are involved. But there should also be a sense in which your body is the channel for the movement, the energy, like a pipe carrying water, if you like. It's a bit more, it's not quite that black and white, but it'll do for an image. So what you want to be able to do is to physically ground yourself here and allow this to flow through the body without restriction. If I do this, the restriction for me is there because I've come up and I'm starting to strain in my back. Now have your hands here, just in front of your hips. Now as you go across into your right next time, just raise your left hand until it's in front of your shoulder and then turn, and notice now where your fingers are pointing, but your arm should still be at 90 degrees to your chest. So you come back, you turn the hand palm down, you come back, you go across, you raise the right hand and you turn, still that 90-degree angle between your chest and your arm. Turn both hands, so right hand is now palm down, left hand is palm up, and of course they cross when your weight is in the middle, come up, and now your arm just lengthens slightly, but still bent in your elbow. Rotate the arms and up. So hitting the ball in front of the shoulder. And again, we have this extension here. There's an aspect of this that is almost like a seesaw, because as you push up in one side, you're dropping down in the other side, and your hands will reflect that. So right side expands, pushing the hand up, and then left side. So we want to find a balance between an awareness of the mechanics of the movement, but also of the flow, the energy of the movement, and how the two elements are interacting. It will get to a point where, with the more subtle awareness of mechanics and connection and so on and so forth, just sort of morphs into the energetic value. It's there comes a point where it's actually quite hard to distinguish them, and that's from that you could extrapolate the idea that we find in sort of like modern science, that actually kind of everything is energy. It's just that some is more dense than others. So this is an idea that we find both in traditional texts associated with the background to Tai Chi, but also, as I say, in modern science. Now, this time, both hands hang down, and notice that they're slightly angled outwards. not like that, and here, not really forwards, but just out a little bit. So just carry on with that. If I this is called a Tai Chi ruler, by the way, Tai Chi bun. So you know, I could do this exercise like this. I wouldn't have my hands very far apart, but it would have that same thing. So you can see that the hands don't suddenly do this, and I'll drop I didn't want to drop it because it's a gift from somebody. So they are out a bit, but essentially your hands are not going to change their relative position. And what happens is you do what you did with hitting the ball, but then you sink down a little bit more and see if you can turn a little bit more. Cow gazes at the moon, come back to the middle, go across. So in the first instance, you start to look between your hands towards the front corner of wherever you are, or, you know, towards the front, and then just see if there's potential for going a little bit further. And that would always start with a sort of releasing in the supporting leg, not a straining in your back. The cow gazes at the moon. And then change into holding the ball and circling the ball in front of your face. Straighten your feet up. You don't need them out now. And as much as possible, keep your weight in the middle here. And once again, your hands are more or less straight out from your shoulders. So once again, I'll show you with the bun here. And you know, in your own time, next time you have a cardboard inner tube from something like a kitchen roll or tin foil or something like that, or if you've got a lightweight stick of some kind about shoulder width apart, you see, this is how much my hands are moving independently. And once again, I'm not doing this. So the hands are very much together, and when you do that, you can very much feel the connection to the center, because you can't do as much with your hands. So it's a good example of this idea that, you know, the quieter the hands, the more we will realize what's going on within our body. And in particular with this exercise, I find lower back and hips. And if you think about this, we've got a vertical circle here, not so dissimilar to polishing the table, which is a horizontal circle. Change direction. Once again, if I turn my back, you still see me here. If I exaggerate, I'm going to do this. I'm throwing my knees out because I'm turning far too far. So the role of your shoulders in this exercise is to move your arms up and down, not to move them around, because the sideways movement is taken care of by the center of your body. And that's why it's such a good exercise for your back, your lower back. Okay, and then once again, bring your hands down and shake out. So if I shave from the side, actually, when I do polishing the table, if I do it without too much of a movement forward, I do this, and then I push the hips back a bit, and this gives me the horizontal movement. when I do the circling the ball, I turn my hands in. This is the movement there in the hips. I don't need to do that because the hands don't go forwards at all. And what happens here in the shoulder is this. Just up and down. I'll show you with the bum once again. Just quite interesting here. So I do this. That's one movement. And then this is another movement. When I put the two together, I turn and I lift. I turn back. And then as I turn to the other side, I drop down and I turn back. And suddenly the arms are moving with a lot less effort. And that's quite interesting, I think. Put 1 foot forwards. I never used to do circling the ball. I found it quite a boring exercise. And then one day, for some reason, in one of my advanced classes, I just said, let's have a go at this. And we started to do it, and I started to talk about it, and it took 3/4 of an hour to break the movement down and put it back together. This is a movement that up until then I thought was a bit dull, not much going on. So there's a great deal going on in there. But now, transferring your weight. Again, that willingness to just settle, to take the time to settle. And then raising your toes and your heel. Once again, the raising of your toes, the raising of your heels opens up more movement. When we did hit the ball in front of the shoulder, it allowed us to turn more. When you do this, you may find that your body turns a little bit, which is quite natural, especially when you've got the front foot a little bit turned out. But it's more about, you know, I get to here, I've got 70% of my weight in my back foot. As I raise my toes, I can go back a little bit. I went back too far then, but I just want you to see that. Not only do I go back, but it actually means that I can get this feeling of releasing and dropping through my hips and pelvis much more. And then stepping in. And on the other side. So in the basic movement, when you go forwards, you get about 60% of your weight in. When you go back, up to 70. So you're not quite above the leg. when you raise your toes, you maybe go from 70 to 75 or something like that, a little bit further, 60 to 65, whatever. Just a little bit of sort of settling in until eventually you won't. At this point, you won't have 100% of your weight on your supporting leg because the other leg is still there, of course. It's not above it, but you reduce the amount of weight in the empty leg, and then from here it's just a case of contracting your leg to bring the foot in, pushing back and out, so that you retain the hip width. Do the same thing, going back, you raise the toes, and so on and so forth. If I try and move my foot before this, I'm kind of fighting my own weight. I mean, you can do that, and you can get to a point where you can have 60% of the weight forward. It's quite an interesting exercise because what you have to work harder in this back leg. But it's not the first thing that we would do. Taking a few steps. And then going back. And shake it. So that idea of being aware of the mechanics, working with the mechanics of the step-in, also impacts on the fluidity of the step-in. If you're trying to step and it's a bit like that, then that represents an interruption in the flow of the movement. Whereas if you can get the mechanics, the physical side of the action to a point which minimizes the amount of straining that you have to do, then you end up with something that is more likely to flow. Once again, you can't separate it out. Well, in my experience, the example I sometimes give to people is that if you've got an old broken down car, a bit like mine really, you could go to a garage and you could put the really expensive petrol in, but it's a broken down old car. It will make a bit of a difference, but it's not, unless you're prepared to do something about the mechanics of the car and the structure of the car. It's not going to make it go much better. So you need to work on both. Now have your right foot forwards, hands at your side. So turn your hands palm forwards and then bird folds its wings. Your arms staying, your hands staying below your shoulders, so you're not going to here, or when you go back, you're not pulling the hands back. So the transfer of your weight is the driving force, complemented just by this a simple rotation. If I come closer there, you see there my hand is palm out, and then it's back. And in the process of doing that, you get this opening and closing just here, where in the front of the shoulder, where your arm meets your chest. So we retain that quieter quality in our arms and our hands that allows for more awareness of what's happening in the rest of the body. So now, leaving your hands facing palm back, drop back, settle into your back foot. Just notice where your hands go. Go forwards. Imagine somebody has hold of your hands. And now when the hands come through, you'll find that they swing a little bit further. So we go into fisherman cast the net. But that same soft, quiet feeling in your arms and your hands, the momentum of the movement, remember, momentum is again just another way of describing energy, describing the effect of energy in the body, and it builds. You know, you've got the constant movement and the weight of your arms. Your arms are quite heavy. Now imagine just having a conker hanging from a piece of string, and you just move it a little bit and it will start to move. And you just keep doing that and it will just, you know, gravity will pull it down and so on and so forth. We also have this awareness of what's happening in chest and upper back. So you might even want to, with this one again, I'm going to move so you see, this is grossly exaggerated. I go forward and I stick my chest out, and then as my arms are released, I sort of, and it goes forward. Forget the alignment of the body, because that was clearly wrong. But so you've got these very subtle movements in the rib cage, in the upper back, and elsewhere in your body. All of these things contribute a little bit to the overall movement. And then pushing a wave, pushing the boat. Repulse the monkey, leaving your front hand over the foot, coming back, drop the rear hand down and turn. Wait until your hand reaches your shoulder, elbow dropping down, and then push forwards. Get to the front here, turn out a little bit. It can only be a small movement, that one, and then back. If you do, as I do, generally, sort of look a little bit at the hand that's swinging up. It's a glance, is all. We're just checking out what's there and then returning your attention to the front hand. Okay, shake out. Have your left foot forward, so bird folds its wings. So it's not that we don't want the arms to do anything, or that we want to ignore them or anything like that. Just we want them to really be able to express and to shape the movement, the energy that comes through the body. And then change into fisherman cast the net. and pushing away. And then the pulse in the monkey. Okay, and then shake out. Good. Yeah. Open your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Shoulder. Arm. Side. Push your back. Round your hips. Nice on your belly as always. And the upper half of the chest. Shake out. So give yourself a few moments in the standing posture again. Feet parallel. You can have your feet just a little bit turned out if that's more comfortable for you, but not too far. Don't do this. This gives you 3 directions then for your body, out there and forwards. When we do the wider stance, we do have the feet turned out more, but in the parallel stance, in the hip stance, we're trying to be very much facing forwards. It does mean that actually when we try to sink down in this posture, we really have to work at letting go just here in what we call the qua, this softening there. Another way you can play with that, if you start with your feet together, which some Tai Chi sequences or a lot of them do, then actually you can see it doesn't really work for me because there's a little gap between my knees. This is normal for me. But when I sink down in this, watch what happens to that gap. So the dropping of my hips actually creates a bit of space between the legs. And then what I would normally do in a Tai Chi form that uses this is I would then step out. So it's another example of where we get more space by releasing in this area of the hips front and back, we always talk about the quad, but it's that whole area, and including the back itself, lower back itself, that needs to give for that to happen. So embrace tiger, return to mountain, sinking down, and then embracing the tiger. Feel gravity just drawing your hips down. Let that draw your hands in and drop. One more time. And stand. A couple of slow, gentle breaths as you stand there. Shake out. Lovely. Thank you very much, everybody. That went quite quickly for me.